In 2009, NASA launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a bold mission to map our moon in such detail that future crewed and robotic missions could not only land safely, but also go to scientifically important locations. With the start of the Artemis missions, the future is now, as NASA prepares to send humans to the lunar South Pole. This region is of particular scientific interest because it features areas of extended sunlit illumination and permanent shadow, is known to contain resources like water, and sits on the rim of the oldest impact crater in the Earth-Moon system. Over the years, LRO's suite of scientific instruments has delivered as promised, giving us incredible new views and data on this terrain, helping us build a roadmap for exploration. So follow this series as we take a look at how the LRO mission is laying the groundwork for Artemis science. One of the instruments on LRO is the Lunar Orbiter Laser Altimeter, or LOLA. It provides topographic data on the lunar surface, revealing slopes and surface roughness, helping us create models of lunar gravity and surface brightness, as well as high-resolution 3D maps of the moon. In this visualization, the colors correspond to different elevations found amongst the craters and mountains of the South Pole region. Having accurate elevation data is essential for landing site selection, surface navigation, identifying areas where resources can be found, and planning the design of future lunar infrastructure. In addition, studying the elevation and topography of the moon contributes to scientific research about its geological history, formation processes, and ongoing changes. By analyzing elevation data, scientists can learn more about the moon's past volcanic activity, impact history, and tectonic processes. The global terrain mapping by LOLA also makes it possible to simulate sunlight and shadow on the moon at any date in the past or future. Here, we see a visualization of the region in 2028, depicting the changes in shadowing in 2-hour intervals over the course of the year. This information is vital to Artemis for planning exploration endeavors, since the low sun angles and terrain of the South Pole produce a uniquely challenging lighting environment. In the years since LRO's launch, there have been over 60,000 orbits of the spacecraft and 10 billion laser shots at the lunar surface, making LOLA's data a vital resource for both human and robotic explorers that arrive at the South Pole in the coming years. It's one piece in how LRO is helping NASA usher in a new generation of lunar science.
Good morning, everybody. This is Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific and the Explore Alliance. And this is day 3 of the 2024 ALCon event in Overland Park, Kansas. There are a couple of hundred amateurs from all across the country attending this event to see fantastic speakers like Garrett Parkins, who's with us today. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Kent, and you can properly introduce Garrett.
Good morning, Scott, and it's good to see you on a Saturday. I hate to see you in the office having to sit there and do this, but thank you for doing this so everybody can see it. I'm Kent Marshall with Scientific, sitting here in the hallway outside of the convention meeting room, and I've got with me Garrett Parkins, who is a contractor for NASA working on the ground propulsion systems for Artemis, right? Yes, and we've been having a great visit. And somebody before we got in here asked him a question about, how many Midwesterners are involved in the program. And I was frankly surprised by your answer. What is that answer?
Yeah, so I would say the majority of folks that work at Kennedy Space Center kind of makes sense, are local. They grew up in Florida. They attended Florida universities, and they Kennedy. I think I've seen one other vehicle with Kansas State plates as I moved down to the state. But I would say that it's rare to run into someone who's from the Midwest. It's a lot of folks from Florida itself. And,
so what's it going to take to change that? I think
it's letting folks know at Midwestern universities and of course technical schools, and there's plenty of technicians that work on the program as well, and in any discipline, that these jobs exist. You kind of have to do your own research. I was fortunate enough to attend a university in the Southeast for my graduate program and just happened to run into an alumnus who was recruiting. But you kind of have to do more than just go on the website. It's hard to make connections in this business all the time.
You grew up in Kansas City, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you wanted to be a fireman all your life, right?
Yeah.
Is that what this was, or
I think
firefighter?
I definitely knew probably more than I needed to about the space program as an elementary school kid. But no, this is what I wanted to do all my life, is be part of the space program. Before it had a name, before I really knew what an aerospace engineer was, and thought, well, a person who makes something is an inventor. I want to be an inventor. Grew to realize, well, that's engineering, and that's why I'm here.
What was that steps? What'd you do through high school that set you up and got you on that career path that you, as a kid, dreamed about?
Yeah.
And you kept that dream. What was that look? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I did space camp, or I think they called it the Future Astronaut Training Program in Hutchinson, Kansas, at the Cosmosphere for a couple of years, and that was an awesome introduction to kind of what the space program looks like. Not just what the astronauts do, but what the ground controllers, what the engineers are involved with. Beyond that, I kind of focused my universities knowing that I need to go and get a solid engineering foundation and education before I specialize down into aerospace. Kansas State University has a great mechanical engineering program. I went through that and then knew that I needed to focus more into aerospace, went to Auburn University to get my master's.
And then ran into an alumni and got a job. So did you go straight from grad school to the contractor you worked for?
Yes, sir.
Straight out. And so there was no intermediate step. You literally went into NASA.
Yep. I was
working with NASA.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that the contract I work for now was they had a recruiting person at the right place at the right time at the general, not even the engineering, but the general career fair at Auburn. Saw a 7-foot billboard of the SLS rocket and said, well, that's what I want. Went and talked to him, got an interview and got the job.
We were sitting here and the lead-in video showed a picture of the moon and Garrett went, ooh, the moon, and he literally drew his attention, probably like that 7-foot poster. You went, ooh, NASA, and made a beeline over there for it. So talk about what your job is, right? When people hear you work for Artemis, you don't have expertise in the moon landing systems, or, you have a very narrow, small portion of a really, really big project.
Yeah.
Talk about what you do.
Yeah. So I'm a fluids design engineer. I work mainly on the ground systems for the Artemis SLS vehicle. So the main engines on that vehicle are the same ones that were used on the space shuttle. So a lot of hardware already exists. There's a lot to do in modernizing it and making sure it still works down the line to support these Artemis missions.
But it's proven technology.
Yes, sir.
The benefit of this is taking existing technology, modernizing it. But it's a foundation. It's very stable, proven technology.
Yes, the engines that I believe are being used on the first 4 Artemis rocket missions are actually flown space shuttle engines. So you've got that heritage of, we know this engine works. We know it because we put it on the back of an orbiter and flew it 3 or 4 times.
And the same with the solid rocket engines that are also part of the space launch system.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we know what happens when an O-ring fails, and thanks to that disaster.
Yeah.
Which leads me to a question, and I don't know, this is not your area of expertise,
Sure.
but I think you can speak on a little bit. Right now the Boeing craft that's on the space station has a helium leak, I think, right?
Yeah.
But you also hear about hydrogen leaks and little leaks in the systems that abort launches. Talk about how hard it is when you're talking about molecular level leaks. And that's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Very, very tiny holes, but it's a leak.
Yeah. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time looking at the potential for leaks like that. Like you said, hydrogen and helium are the 2 smallest molecules, and both are used extensively in spaceflight for a variety of purposes. Obviously, hydrogen is fuel. Helium is what we call a service gas. And so there are a lot of leak detection systems that are involved with ground hardware, not just to ensure that you don't have a leak that could compromise the mission in some way, but to protect personnel, because anytime you're introducing a gas or a liquid into the environment, you're taking out some oxygen. And of course, that's a huge safety risk. Beyond that, just selecting components that are leak rated. We have a lot of experience with hydrogen, what was used on shuttle. It's what we're using now for SLS. That kind of is a big benefit to us as well.
So one of the benefits you have, because you live, in Florida and you work at Kennedy Space Center,
Yep.
right? So you live, within an easy driving distance. One of the benefits of that is you get to see launches.
Yeah, I have probably seen over 100 launches now. Obviously, the most important to me was the launch of Artemis I. Stayed up till, well, just didn't sleep that night. The launch was at 1:47 a.m. On November 16th of 2022. Not that I have it memorized or anything, but obviously that was more significant for me. But I rarely miss a launch anymore. If it's 3 a.m. and it's something I've seen launch before, I may not get up. But if I'm awake and there's a rocket going off, I'm gonna be one.
Do you ever see it reaching the point for you that it's like the bus passing the bus stop near your house? That you don't ever foresee that becoming humdrum, ho-hum. It's always gonna be, I'm gonna go see them.
Yeah, that's how it's gonna be for me. I know that folks that grew up there and have lived there a lot of their lives, for some of them it becomes regular, but I have a colleague that grew up, saw it. Dad worked on shuttle, granddad, I believe, worked on Apollo, and he's still up for every launch too.
So
It's a way of life.
I guess it is. It's a way of life to be part of that launch system. Talk about the feeling you get when you see this millions of pounds suddenly start slowly and faster and faster, and you see it, and then 20 or 30 seconds later, depending on the distance, you feel it. Talk about those emotions.
Yeah, and I'm getting chills just as you, because I'm imagining in my mind this is what an SLS or what a Falcon Heavy looks like when it leaves the pad. And it's interesting because these days they're a little bit faster than you would expect, but they still, it takes several seconds for them to clear the pad, and it doesn't look right. You say to yourself, well, I've seen that. I've been around that for that rocket for a couple of years now. I saw it come in. They stacked it. It's been static this whole time. That can't possibly lift off, let alone go into space, and yet it does. That's the miracle of that technology, is that we're able to do that.
The miracle of math.
Absolutely.
The miracle of
Yep.
of math. And you said it gives you goosebumps just to think about it.
Yeah.
What's that sound feel like when it hits you?
It's not even a sound. It's a sound and a vibration that you feel throughout your body, where you almost feel like you're not standing on the ground, almost like you're kind of floating, like you're in zero gravity for a second. It's anyone who has the opportunity to come out and see a launch, whether it's at Kennedy or Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg in California or anywhere, go do it. It's hard to schedule around. There's always going to be scheduling things going on with these launches, but it's worth seeing.
There's leaks, there's weather windows, there's other things. I've been down a couple of times in Florida and missed the launch because of weather or because of another, board. And you just have to go down with the idea of, I have the ability to stay here to see this something go off.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, with all the different systems that are going up now from Kennedy Space Center and other places, the opportunity is better than ever, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You've got SpaceX has got a remarkable launch cadence. You've got a lot of launches that are going up from United Launch Alliance, from a lot of the smaller providers. The nature of the Artemis program and how often we're going to the moon. We're a little less frequent, but when we go, you'll know.
So you gave your speech a little while ago, and it was a very nice overview of Artemis. And you get asked a lot of technical questions outside of your expertise. And one person said, "Why go? Why send humans when we can send probes to do this?"
Mm-hmm.
And I get that question a lot. And what's your answer?
I would say, foremost, I mean, we're going because we have the capability to do so, and because there are certain things that humans can do that, despite all the skills we have in robotics and developing these probes, there's certain things only humans can do. I think only humans can start to walk in one direction on the lunar surface, and they spot something kind of back behind a crag and say, "Oh no, I want to go see what that is." And they walk over and find a huge deposit of water ice or something like that, for example. Or they're walking on Mars, they find an element they weren't expecting to see. And I think it's also important for us as a species, I think that sending humans makes it more real to everyone back on Earth to be able to say, well, that person is fundamentally like me. They're up there. That's something that either I can do too, or I can contribute to.
My answer, and I shared this with you when we were talking, is my answer to it has become very simple. It's because humans can do in hours what probes and robots and other remote sensing might take years to do in a matter of days. But there was an example on Mars last day or two. The rover had crunched through some crust and they turned the cameras on to look at it and they found elemental sulfur,
Yep.
which had never been seen before
Yeah.
on Mars,
This was-
correct?
I'm not sure if they'd found it before or not. I think they had an inkling it was there, but it was certainly the first time that they had that confirmed. And if I remember the article correctly, they were surprised that it was on that area.
Mhm.
They were expecting to see it. So that teaches us more about what Mars is made up of.
Right, another little bit of data. So, the launch schedule, a couple launches scheduled for Artemis in September next year, and then the year after that, obviously those can change. They're not cast in stone, but if everything goes, we're gonna start seeing Artemis I or Artemis II, Artemis III, Artemis IV, and go back to the moon, walk on the moon, start building the gateway,
Mhm.
which is a
I call it a
basically,
mini ISS.
it's an ISS that goes around the moon because becomes a staging area close to the moon. But the mathematics to do this, I mean, it is rocket science, and the math that gets the trajectories just right and know exactly how much energy it takes to put you in the exact right spot is just fascinating to me. I don't have those.
Absolutely is.
I don't have those math skills. And those people that can do that, I- they're brilliant people. That's what fascinates me is how accurately we can do these things now and get on the right spot, let alone what Apollo did and Mercury did before them.
Yeah.
Without the computing power we have now, just truly astounding what humans were able to do. And what spin-off technologies do you see? And you spoke about this a little
Sure.
bit. Spin-off technologies is going to change our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to see into the future, but
Yeah.
what kinds of things do you think might come from this?
Yeah, so something that's been talked about a lot regarding the moon and the South Pole is the presence of helium-3, which is known as an excellent fuel for potential nuclear fusion, but is very scarce and difficult to produce on Earth. So that's one thing first and foremost. Beyond that, water issues going forward on Earth. It's becoming more difficult in parts of the world to find water. The potential for water on the moon kind of opens up the possibilities of using that not just in space, but potentially using it elsewhere. Beyond that, 3D printing has become huge on Earth. NASA's been doing a lot of looking at 3D printing with lunar regolith or with the material on the surface of Mars to create habitation. So that instead of having to bring building materials in, you can build with what you got there, similar to what you do with an igloo in Alaska.
Fascinating technology is going to come from it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard to predict even now what will
Yeah,
happen.
what will happen. I mean, nobody foresaw, the things that came out of the space race that, and the Apollo missions. They're used every day and we take for granted. And people don't realize back that all this technology came out of spin-off programs from Apollo.
Absolutely.
And they affect our lives every single day, like GPS. People don't think, oh, why do we need, stuff up. You have GPS on your phone and your watch.
Yeah.
That tells you exactly where you are
Mhm.
and exactly what time it is. That's from the space race.
Yep.
That's from, humans going out and exploring. Now, I'll finish with this question.
Sure.
One of the ladies asked us when I was standing there, are they going to build it where we can see it? And you don't know the answer to that. I don't, but my answer to it is I find that horrifying that one day we might see skyscrapers on the surface of the moon. What's your feelings about that?
I'm torn. On one hand, it would be amazing to have that level of technology to where you'd be able to look up at the moon and see something that was made by humans. But on the other hand, the moon, the way it is now, has been constant throughout billions of years. And all of our ancestors, when they looked up at the moon, they see what we see now. And I think there's value to that too. I think that there's a way to develop the moon and increase its value to us in a responsible way.
Yeah, I think we should put a really bright light on the moon and get flat earthers and say, okay, Garrett, tell me when and I'll turn the light on. Right.
Yeah.
And 2.5 seconds after you say now, that light on the moon's gonna come on, you're gonna be able to see it with your naked eye. And go click and, light speed up, light speed back, the light's on, go, tell me when to turn it off. And for the people who don't believe we went to the moon, they now explain it to them.
I would hope that would be a convincing argument. I think, with Artemis, we're gonna do a lot of high def footage of people walking around on the moon. Hopefully that contributes as well to people realizing this is something that's achievable for us.
Yeah. Or you're part of the vast conspiracy.
I could be.
You could be. All right. We've wandered off the rails here, I think.
Yes, a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay.
fault.
Very inspiring comments, I think that everybody, well, I tell kids today that they're probably the last generation to see the moon the way that it is today, okay? And the last generation to not know of a time when the moon was not inhabited. I think that the moon, once we start colonizing, it will remain inhabited to a degree. It may be at rare times, I don't know, maybe around certain holidays or something like that where everybody comes home, but I can see that we are constantly in space now. We have our appliances are flying all over the solar system. We have spacecraft out of our solar system flying into interstellar space. Humans are now an interstellar spacefaring species. That's we haven't put a flesh and blood human out there as far any further than the moon at this point, but that day will come. We'll go to Mars, it may take longer than we want, but there's a lot to learn getting out there. We can send people out there on a super dangerous mission and not really be totally prepared. But I prefer that we wait and learn how to build stuff on the world that we go to and to find resources to keep ourselves alive there. So that's my own personal take on it. You mentioned something that you would be horrified, Kent, if you saw a skyscraper on the moon. You probably can't see a skyscraper on Earth, I don't think, from the moon, even with an amateur telescope. Perhaps you could. There might be some areas, some city constructs or something like that. But we already have stuff up there. And LRO has already taken photographs proving that the Apollo missions did land and other spacecraft as well. So
I guess, Scott, I said hyperbole. It's like, I think it was hyperbole,
Yeah.
No, hyperbole.
I think I would just be like in awe, like, oh my God, I was part of that generation that saw this happen, so I think that would be really cool.
There is that. I mean, so, and
Yeah.
it would be undeniable proof, that we are indeed up there. So anyway.
Yeah, for all the naysayers, but naysayers will nay. I mean, that's it. That's what they do.
I think
So
that's a T-shirt right there, Scott.
that's right.
Nice, show a
Naysayers will nay. Okay,
yeah.
that's right. Okay, so we got Rebecca Frisch watching on Facebook, and she wants to know, what advice would you give to a high school senior when it comes to deciding on an astronomy, astrophysics program in college or in general? Are there specific schools in which you would really love their particular program, or what you hear about it? Also, more specifically, would you say they will need a master's or even a doctorate to work in the field for NASA, JPL, et cetera?
Sure. So I'm more on the engineering side, so I can speak to that more so. As far as astronomy goes, I'll say I know that the University of Dallas has an excellent program. I'm familiar with a professor of astrophysics there, but for the engineering side, some advice that I was given fairly early on is if you are planning on doing an advanced degree, like a master's or a PhD, where you go for your undergrad is important for getting the fundamentals of that science down. But it doesn't necessarily need to be exactly what you want to do, because that's going to get focused down when you do a graduate degree. Beyond that, I can say I had an excellent experience at both Kansas State University and Auburn University. But yeah, that's about it as far as the engineering side of it goes. Someone to take that engineering degree and know too that an engineering degree can be applied in a lot of different ways. Anything from sales onto more of the kind of things that I do, onto just a general understanding of how the universe works and the mechanics of the celestial bodies and everything involved with that. It's pretty multidisciplinary, especially at an early level.
And I want to build on to this. People get focused on college degrees. You mentioned earlier trade schools.
Yes, sir.
There's welders, there's electricians, they're wiring things. There's all these trades that work with you and in the program that don't have doctorates and whatever, but they're vital to the operation of the program. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So as a design engineer, I design a lot of systems. And when we have a design, what we think is completed, we go to the guys in the shop and say, hey, can you actually make this? Do you think this makes sense? Do you have any recommendations at this time? Because they have more hands-on experience than we have in what works and what doesn't work. And it's critical that now more than ever, we have not just engineers who have a lot of education involved in the engineering side of things, but we have technicians who care as much about the program as we do and are ready to point out when things can be improved based on their personal experience.
And that's a trade.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scott, you got anything else on from the?
No, we just have people saying good morning, and one gentleman writing in from Brazil is talking about how telescope crazy he is. So I think that's a good thing, so,
Yeah.
especially from a guy that builds telescopes.
We're in a hobby, Scott, as you all know. When we all look at the moon tonight or tomorrow night or whenever, we're seeing the same exact moon that he's seeing in Brazil at the same time he's seeing it.
It's true.
We're all live under the same sky, and we all see that, and it's very, very uniting, I think, that we deal with the same sky.
And Garrett, I want to thank you for coming on to this live program, and also for interacting with the Astronomical League and being at their ALCon event. For amateur astronomers that join the Astronomical League, to see you live in person and to interact with someone like you is a big deal. And so that's wonderful. It's inspiring, and it'll be something they'll talk about for the rest of their lives. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Thank you for giving us your time.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Scott, we're going to be talking to a fellow in a few minutes that talks about doing binocular astronomy and the joys he gets out of that. And we're going to do some, there's a person speaking now talking about live stacking astrophotography and other skills this afternoon as well. So got a pretty good lineup today. I think it's going to be a very interesting day for our viewers. So keep that up.
All right. Until next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
And for all of you guys watching right now, we'll just do a change on our setup here, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Take care.